millionaire in decline asked the nurse for one last favor. But when the nurse returned to the room, he couldn't believe what he was seeing. A woman with a humble heart, a dedicated nurse, and a young woman in search of answers. Amanda always believed in true heroes, until an unexpected friendship and a family secret changed everything. But not everyone is what they seem. Amanda had always been an intriguing figure in the local community. Known for her substantial wealth, she preferred a modest lifestyle and was admired for her discreet generosity. Her aversion to luxury was evident in her choice to visit public hospitals, where she believed healthcare professionals were more connected to their vocations. She always said that the true heroes were those who chose to work in less privileged conditions to really make a difference. Carlos, a young nurse, was one of those heroes. Known for his dedication and empathy, he was adored by patients and colleagues alike. However, he faced prejudice from Dr. Thompson, a physician who, despite his competence, carried racist attitudes that tainted his reputation. Dr. Thompson frequently undermined Carlos, subtly questioning his abilities and creating a tense environment. Despite this, Carlos never let the prejudice shake him. Always maintaining a professional demeanor, he continued to perform his duties masterfully. His ability to comfort and care for patients with a genuine smile made him a bright presence in the hospital. Amanda, who regularly visited the hospital to manage a chronic condition, developed a deep friendship with Carlos. They discussed everything, from everyday trivialities to philosophical matters, and Amanda appreciated Carlos' calm wisdom. One morning, just like any other, Amanda appeared visibly agitated, something that was unusual for her. She called a nurse and asked for Carlos to be brought to her immediately. When he entered the room, he found her holding a piece of paper with an address. "Carlos, I need a favor," she said, her voice tinged with urgency. "I need you to go to this address and bring the person you find there. Tell them it's urgent." Carlos, surprised, took the paper. "Of course, Amanda. But what's going on? Is everything all right?" He felt genuine concern for Amanda, whose usual composure seemed to be crumbling. Amanda looked at him, her eyes filled with worry. "Please, Carlos, trust me. This is very important," she replied, avoiding further details. Respecting her privacy, Carlos left immediately to carry out the task. The address led him to a simple house in a quiet neighborhood. When he arrived, he was greeted by a young woman with a curious and concerned expression. "Hello, I'm Carlos, a nurse. Amanda asked me to come and get you. She said it's urgent," he explained, noticing the surprise in the woman's eyes. "I'm Julia," the young woman responded hesitantly. "Amanda? What's going on? Is she okay?" The concern in Julia's voice was palpable. "She's all right, but it seems like something important." "Please come with me," Carlos said, trying to reassure her. Julia, although confused, agreed to go, visibly worried about her friend. On the way back to the hospital, the car was filled with silence. Julia stared out the window, trying to calm her mind, which was full of questions. "Amanda is so private. I can't imagine what could be so urgent," she commented, finally breaking the silence. Carlos, keeping his eyes on the road, responded in a calm voice. "She seemed really worried. Maybe it's something personal. I'm sure she'll explain everything once we get there." He tried to convey a sense of calm, though he himself was curious and a little anxious to find out what was going on. When they arrived at the hospital, they went directly to Amanda's room. The scene they found was surprising. Amanda was sitting, visibly pale, while Roger, her husband, paced angrily back and forth. The tension in the air was palpable. Amanda, seeing Carlos and Julia, motioned for them to come closer. "Julia, it's time for you to know the truth," Amanda began, her voice trembling but determined. She took a deep breath before continuing. "You are my adopted daughter. My late husband, Henry, and I adopted you when you were still a baby. We always planned to tell you, but it never seemed like the right time." Julia froze. Amanda's words echoed in her mind, leaving her stunned. What are you saying? How is that possible?" she stammered, trying to process the information. Roger, unable to contain himself, intervened in a voice filled with anger. You hid this from me, Amanda. How could you? That inheritance is mine too. I won't stand for this, he shouted, advancing toward Amanda with a furious expression. Amanda, visibly shaken, tried to keep her composure. Roger, I've always wanted to protect Julia. She has the right to know about her origins, and the inheritance is hers by right. This isn't about money, it's about family. Julia, struggling to gather her thoughts, looked at Amanda with eyes full of confusion and pain. I always felt there was something different, but I never thought it was this. Why didn't you tell me? Why keep this from me for so long? Carlos, sensing the growing tension, intervened gently. We're all surprised. I think we should take a deep breath and try to process all this calmly, he suggested, attempting to ease the charged atmosphere. Amanda looked at Julia, her eyes full of tears. I was afraid of how it would affect you, Julia. I wanted you to have a normal life without the weight of this truth. But now I see that hiding it was a mistake. The atmosphere in the room was tense and volatile. Roger, still furious, took a threatening step toward Amanda. You can't exclude me from this. I have my rights, he shouted, raising his hand in an aggressive gesture. Carlos, quickly positioning himself, stepped between Roger and Amanda, determined to protect his patient. Roger, please calm down. This isn't the way to solve things, Carlos said, his voice firm but calm. He knew that any escalation of violence could have serious consequences. Before the situation could worsen, a nurse, alerted by the noise, entered the room and, seeing the scene, called hospital security. Within minutes, the security guards arrived and restrained Roger, who continued to protest vehemently. This is absurd. You can't treat me like this, he shouted as he was escorted out of the room. Amanda, trembling and visibly scared, took a deep breath, trying to compose herself. Roger, I was going to tell you, but I never knew how. You were always more interested in my fortune than in me or our family, she said, her voice cracking with emotion. Julia, still in shock, looked at Amanda with a mixture of compassion and pain. So, he knew? He always knew? And what else did he hide from me? She asked, trying to understand the extent of the betrayal. Amanda shook her head, tears streaming down her face. No, he didn't know. I always kept this a secret, even from Roger. He never really cared. He only wanted the money, she replied, her voice laden with sadness. Carlos, trying to ease the situation, approached both women. What's important now is that everyone is safe. We'll work through this together. Peacefully, he said, his voice full of empathy. The arrival of the police, who had been alerted due to Roger's aggressive behavior, heightened everyone's apprehension. Roger was arrested and taken into custody, leaving Amanda, Julia, and Carlos shocked and shaken. With Roger in custody, the investigation progressed quickly. The truth that emerged was staggering. Roger had been slowly poisoning Amanda. He administered small doses of a toxic substance, intending to make it appear as though she was gradually falling ill. His motivation was clear: to inherit Amanda's fortune. The shock of this revelation deeply affected everyone. Amanda, sitting on her hospital bed, stared at Carlos and Julia as the doctor explained the poisoning. I can't believe he was capable of something so monstrous, she said, her voice weak and full of disbelief. He was my husband. I trusted him. Julia, struggling to accept the harsh reality, stood by Amanda's side, holding her hand. This is unbelievable. How can someone be so cruel? He tried to kill you for money, she murmured, still processing the magnitude of the betrayal. I always thought he was just distant, but this? Carlos, ever the steady support, stood beside them. Now that we know the truth, we can take the necessary steps to protect Amanda and ensure that Roger is held accountable, he said, trying to instill a sense of control amid the chaos. Amanda, with tears in her eyes, looked at Carlos and Julia. I feel so betrayed. I don't know how to deal with this, she admitted, her voice breaking with emotion. In the days that followed, Amanda received the treatment needed to combat the poisoning. The doctors were optimistic about her recovery, but the emotional impact of the discovery was profound. Amanda began reflecting on her life and her choices. She decided that she wanted to do something meaningful with her fortune, following the ideals that she and Henry had always valued. "I want this money to do good, to help people who really need it," she affirmed with renewed determination. Meanwhile, the relationship between Julia and Carlos continued to grow stronger. They began spending time together outside the hospital, sharing not only the weight of recent hardships, but also moments of lightness and joy. Carlos became a crucial source of support for Julia, who, despite everything, found comfort in his constant presence and understanding. With Roger officially charged and in custody, a sense of relief permeated the lives of Amanda, Julia, and Carlos. Amanda, recovering physically and emotionally, began to focus on her philanthropic plans. She wanted to use her fortune to create a positive impact in the world, especially to help those who hadn't had the same opportunities she had. "It's time to give back," she told Julia and Carlos, her eyes shining with new hope. The relationship between Carlos and Julia blossomed amid these difficult times. One day, they decided to take a break from everything and went for a peaceful walk in a nearby park. The fresh air and the sound of leaves under their feet provided a moment of serenity. "I don't know what I would have done without you," Julia said, looking at Carlos with a sincere smile. "You've been an anchor for me." Carlos smiled back, touched by her words. "I feel lucky to be by your side too. These last few days have been tough, but they've also brought us closer in ways I never imagined," he replied, his gaze full of affection. As they walked, they talked about their pasts, their hopes, and dreams. Carlos shared stories about his childhood and how his mother had always taught him to treat everyone with dignity and respect despite the financial struggles they had faced. Julia, in turn, shared stories about her life with Amanda, how she had always felt loved, but had always sensed something different about her story. As the day passed, the conversation grew more intimate. "I've never felt this way about anyone before," Julia said, stopping and looking directly into Carlos' eyes. "This connection, it's so deep." Carlos held her hand, feeling the sincerity of her words. "I feel the same, Julia. It seems like everything we've gone through has brought us to this moment," he said, his eyes reflecting the same emotion. Meanwhile, Amanda was busy organizing the details of her philanthropic initiatives. She wanted to ensure that her fortune was used effectively, helping those who needed it most. In a meeting with her lawyers and advisors, she made it clear that her priority was to support education and healthcare, areas she had always valued. "I want these funds to go where they're most needed," she declared, her voice filled with determination. Amanda was finally discharged from the hospital and returned home, accompanied by Julia and Carlos. Returning home brought a mix of emotions for everyone. For Amanda, it was a relief to be in her own space again, surrounded by memories and comfort. For Julia, it was a chance to start anew, now with the full truth of her origins revealed. For Carlos, it was a sign that a new chapter was beginning for them all. On their first night back, Amanda suggested a special dinner to celebrate her recovery and the start of a new path. The table was set with elegant simplicity, reflecting Amanda's modest lifestyle. As they ate, the conversation was light, filled with laughter and stories of the past. But there was an underlying current of something deeper, a sense that they were all ready to move forward in a new way. After dinner, they sat in the living room enjoying a glass of wine. Amanda, watching Julia and Carlos, felt a wave of happiness and peace. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life," she said, smiling at them both. "You two are perfect for each other." Julia and Carlos exchanged glances, and she smiled shyly. "I feel like we've found something special," Julia admitted, holding Carlos' hand. "Something that grew through everything we've been through." Carlos nodded, looking fondly at Julia. "I feel the same, and I'm excited to see where this takes us," he said, squeezing her hand tenderly. Amanda, moved, raised her glass. "To love, to family, and to a bright future," she toasted, her eyes shining with tears of happiness. "And to the new adventures that await us." With Roger out of their lives, the inheritance destined for philanthropic projects, and a new understanding of their personal stories, each of them was ready for a fresh start. Julia, inspired by the values Amanda had instilled in her, began working on social projects with renewed passion. She wanted to ensure that her mother's legacy was honored in a meaningful way and began collaborating with local organizations to improve education and healthcare services. Carlos, alongside Julia, continued his work at the hospital but now with a new perspective. He felt that, alongside Julia, he could truly make a difference, not only in the lives of patients but also in the community at large. Together, they began planning community health programs focused on preventive education and psychological support. The hospital, which had been the setting for so many difficult moments and shocking revelations, now stood as a symbol of rebirth and hope. Amanda, Julia, and Carlos were ready to face the future, strengthened by their love and determination to do good. As they walked together toward this new horizon, each carried with them the lessons of the past and the hope for a better future. The love, trust, and resilience they had developed together were the solid foundation on which they would build their lives going forward. And so, with intertwined hearts and a clear vision of what they wanted for the future, they moved forward, ready to build a life filled with meaning, happiness, and purpose.